Oh, hey guys, how's it going? Changing some tires here. So I know you saw the thumbnail. This video is with me and Adam Michta from Adam Does Dirt Bikes. And I kind of want to just give you a little bit of a preface here. We were supposed to be filming a video, just me showing him how to rebuild his shock. It was going to be kind of a how-to video with Adam, showing him, maybe a little more detail because it was actually showing someone. Then it turned into, seriously, one of the most fun days I've had here at the shop. Adam and I spent hours rebuilding that shock. It normally takes like maybe an hour, 45 minutes if I put my head down. We were down here for probably 4 or 5 hours just talking about suspension, talking about racing, talking about dirt bikes, talking about life, all kinds of cool stuff. So I ended up recording most of it, and I just couldn't cut it down to just a shock video. So I'm going to do this in 2 videos. They're both going to be kind of long. I think it's probably about 35-40 minutes each. But there's 2 separate videos in this series. It's going to involve Adam and I talking about the shock, talking about suspension, super in-depth. Lots of in-depth suspension talk between shim stacks, valving, how high speed works, low speed works. Just all kinds of stuff. And then also just talking about racing, how we feel about racing, how we feel about the state of the sport, how motorcycles saved my life, all kinds of cool stuff. So if that sounds interesting, stick with us for this video. Maybe think about giving us a thumbs up and a subscribe if you haven't. Definitely check out Adam's channel, Adam Does Dirt Bikes, here on YouTube. I'll put a link in the description. Make sure you check that out. We just had so much fun, and it was really cool. It's kind of what happens here at this shop, and I'm assuming very many other shops around the country and around the world where people get together and they grow closer because of dirt bikes, and we had a really good time. So anyway, if that sounds fun, stick with us. Here we go. Hey guys, it's Morgan coming to you with another tech video, but this video is special because we were working with Adam Michta from Adam Does Dirt Bikes. Make sure you check out the link below, check out his channel. Adam is from the Front Range of Colorado. He races hard enduro stuff all over. We'll talk more about what he's doing, but today we are going to service the shock on his, what year is this thing?
It's 2013.
2013 300XCW. Big thanks to Robbie Noyles, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Huge thanks.
I always have to say thank you to Robbie Noyles pretty much in every video I do. I really should just mention that because Robbie has helped me out. He's obviously helped Adam out. Anyway, he's an amazing man who just likes to help dirt bikers out. This will be a little bit different than my normal like how-to videos because I'm going to be showing Adam how to do it. And we're going to be working together on this thing, whole teach a man to fish kind of thing. This is a PDS shock, super easy to remove. We're going to yank that thing off, and then we'll get it over here and take it apart and show you what's going down. These guards are gnarly. I haven't ever...
Dude, let me tell you about these swing arm guards. Alright, so, these swing arm guards, Morgan mentioned they look gnarly, and let me tell you guys about these swing arm guards. They are awesome. So my buddies, from Crosslink Components, they do a lot of hard enduro, and they saw that the swing arm guards were always falling off of the bikes.
Well, I don't run them because they fall off.
Well, you could see them on the trails, but I guarantee that you will not find these swing arm guards on the trails.
No.
So what is special about these guards is over here by the chain tensioner, they have a little bracket, and with this bracket, it kind of ties in, and it locks the swing arm guard in, and it will not come off. And in the hard enduro community, people are eating these things up, and definitely check them out. Crosslink Components, you can find them on Instagram, on their website, crosslinkcomponents.com. And
yeah, here, come in tight here real fast, because like these things are like burly. The other ones, like the cheap ones, they're half that thick, and then they fall off because they're held on by zip ties, which is, what I mean. It is what it is, and that was the technology until now. These things are burly, dude.
They are awesome, and so how this all came about is it was a senior design project for these guys. Bryce and Devin, it was their senior design project, and they created these and designed them, and now people are eating them up. So
where are they from?
So they went to school in Fort Collins.
Okay.
So they're from California, but they went to school in Fort Collins, so I'd say that they are Colorado folk.
Yeah,
that's
awesome.
So support them,
Yeah, absolutely. So guys, here we go. Shock. First things first, we're going to take the spring off of this thing. get this down to its basic components, and then we'll take it apart. So I've mentioned this on other videos. Hopefully this one isn't too tight. I know Adam hasn't messed with it. He's just been given the bike, and but when you tighten, if you tighten this too much on this plastic collar, one thing I don't like about this plastic collar is if you tighten this too much, you'll create a constriction on the shock body, and you can wear this shock body out. So hopefully that's not happened. We'll see. I doubt it. I'm sure it's good. If not, we do stock shock bodies because it happens a lot.
Is it cool if I play around with that while you're doing that, and then maybe we could share the footage?
Oh yeah.
That?
100%.
All right, cool. Yeah. Let's do that, because I will I will feel comfortable learning by shooting, and then.
There we go. So, there we go. So was this Robbie's bike?
So yeah, Robbie picked it up.
Here we go. When this spring, this is a retainer here, comes up, and when there's tension on the spring, it holds tight like that. You take the tension off the spring, drop that down. This comes down. This clip comes off. There we go. And the whole thing, like that. And what I like to do is just set it in situ over here so we don't forget which way things go. So that's in a place now. We're all good. And then now we're good to start disassembling the rest of the shock. Doesn't really matter what order you do this in, but I like to let the nitrogen out. We've got a piston style on these WP shocks. So this is just a Allen, let me squeeze in here, 4mm Allen. And this is gonna go make a bunch of noise here. Kind of like to just let it bleed a little bit before I take it out, because otherwise it'll 150-ish pounds of pressure behind this thing. It'll shoot out everywhere if you take it all out at once. And you guys will see what we're going to do. This is the stock bolt. This requires a special tool to recharge it. Well, they both do, but this one's kind of a pain in the butt tool and expensive. So we're going to chuck that, and we're going to install one of these, which is a, it's got a rubber gasket in the bolt, and so then you can use just a nitrogen needle, which is a much less expensive situation. So we'll do that. But now, boom. Now I gotta get this sucker off. We got just a drift. I use one that's kind of dull. Come in here to one of these holes. You know. Alright guys, here's this thing. You don't have to have this, you can just do it with your fingers. This just makes it nice. So we come in here, I'm gonna push down. And in here is another circlip that goes out to keep this in place. Now, this is where it can get super messy, so we're gonna just kind of go easy. It's not wanting to be nice, so we're gonna do it a different way.
So this is to pull the seal out?
No, we're pulling the whole shaft out.
The shaft out.
Yeah, so put that down. There we go. You can see that is relatively disgusting. It's not the worst I've seen by any means, but you can smell it. I'm sure Adam can smell it. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It's not horrible, but it's not great. So, so this is unique to PDS shocks. This style, it's got two separate shim stacks, like two, well, I guess 4 separate shim stacks technically, but this is a weird thing. Like, this is not what your Yamaha shock's going to look like. It's not what a linkage shock looks like. Having these 2 pistons and everything like that is super different from a lot of things. So now, set this aside. We're going to take a look in here. This looks good. So this is going to be hard for you YouTubers to see what's going on here, but that looks nice and clean. There's no band worn out. Like, when they're bad, you can see like this big worn section, like where that thing clamped.
So these 2 things, like, this is what kind of goes.
Yeah. So
that's what moves up and down, right?
Yeah. So okay.
Are those the valves?
This is the valving. So this is great. Good question. So this goes in here. We'll just pretend like this is inside here. Now you have oil. When this is all together, there's oil on both sides of everything, right? Like it's all moving through. Then, as the shock compresses, so you hit a big bump, it compresses, oil is going to go through these holes and these holes. So like I said, that's different about this than like a linkage shock, is it's got 2 stages. And the reason, okay, so this is great. I've never explained this online. So the reason that this is like that is the problem with PDS or non-linkage shocks is that they're not very progressive. Like a link, the reason that Honda originally put a linkage on their suspension, like from the get-go, was to create a progressive suspension so that it would move quickly in the short amount, but then stiffen up as it compressed. Because if you look at the linkage on a bike, as the swing arm comes up, the geometry changes, making it get stiffer. So it's a progressive suspension without having to do anything with the spring. The spring's a straight wound spring on a normal shock, right? So like they're very progressive. This is KTM's way of making this style, a PDS shock, progressive.
So is it that when it initially hits, it's kind of
it's softer moving in the first part of the stroke, and then it gets stiffer the further into the stroke it goes. So, and the idea is that, like, for instance, let's say you're banging through rocks, right? You're like chundering little rocks, and it needs to move quickly. You know, you want the wheel to move out of the way quickly and come back down quickly, because it's little things. But then you're like, oh shit, there's a big G out, and you hit a G out. You need it to get progressively stiffer,
right,
as that goes. And so what this does is it allows that, because it's got huge big holes here in this, and it's got big openings here, and not a lot of valving here. See these shims? That's the valving. That it's as it comes through. So as this first starts to move, this piston has more to do with everything in the first part of the movement. So, and that's a very soft valving. Then as it shoves further, this has to come further through the oil, and you can see. So
does the oil fill up this section first?
Well, it's in everywhere.
It's
always there, right?
Okay, gotcha.
So when it's bled correctly, it's always there. And there's oil in this whole thing.
Yeah, that makes sense, because
it's encased in oil.
Yeah.
But it's out, right? And then as it hits, it comes up, and this part starts to move through this oil first. Like, even though it's moving all at the same time, this basically allows it to move a little bit quicker, until then the oil really forces down on this and comes through this piston and hits this bigger valving. You can see this shim stack is much thicker. So yeah, like those are all individual. We'll have all that apart here in a second.
And so all those shims, those flex, right?
Yeah. So they kind of like that. Like So here, you let's see. There's some grand thing on there. So I was asking, so this is a very simplified valve stack, shim stack that makes a valve. So as this gets pushed through oil this way, these shims all flex to let the oil by. And so the thicker, all that you do, you can stiffen it up, you can lighten it, you can make these shims a thinner material. They have, thinner shims, thicker shims, different diameters, all that, and they all work together to create the feel of the suspension. And that's where TBT, us, that's where we make our money, right? Like, because we have a lot of testing, a lot of information coming from Travis and all over the country with TBT on what's working in different terrain, different like hard enduro, motocross, GNCC, Western hare scrambles, NHHA, whatever. Everybody races differently, right? Like it's all different, and so you need different things for different disciplines. For instance, hard enduro, you want it to move quite a bit, but you don't want it to rebound super fast. So that bounces you. So I've noticed that when I ride harder stuff, I have never raced a hard enduro race, but I've ridden a lot of gnarly, like rock crawling trails and things like that. I actually turn my rebound in a little bit because generally you're like going through these big rock things, and you go hit, and you don't want to go rat and like come up and squirt you. You know, you kind of want to be slower to return. Not a lot slower, but a little bit slower than like if you were, charging through a big rock garden fast. You want that wheel to get back out quickly to catch the next hit. So all that, let's come back over here, is control in here. And so these on this side and this side are the compression stacks. And then on this side and this side are the rebound stacks. So as it goes through this way, this stack and this stack are controlling it. And then as it comes out and the oil's going back through here, it comes and hits these stacks, and it controls how slowly or quickly it opens back up. And then you're also controlling it with this. This is basically, when people talk about clickers, they're just bypasses of the valve. It's a bypass to let oil pass the valve without going through the valve. And so this one is clicking inside. It's a needle inside here that you're opening and closing, and that hole right there is the bypass hole. So if you open that up, it lets more bypass and skip this valve and come out. If you close it down, it makes more of it go through the valve. Same with the compression. That's up here. You have high speed and low speed here. The high speed compression is this outside thing. There's actually valving in here. We'll take that apart here in just a bit. There's valving inside here that, because when this moves too quickly, if this thing goes, you hit something really hard, and it's trying to go through, the oil can't get through this valve fast enough, right? And that's on purpose. So it pushes it. It's hard to see, but there's a passageway down inside there, which probably, let's see if you can see that. See that on the very end, there's a passageway. So in there, it'll bypass that valve, come into this valving, and force the oil into this canister, and then the nitrogen pushes it back in, to keep it. So anyway, and it's even more complicated than that, but that's the basic situation. And then this is the low speed clicker. So that's the the slower speed stuff that then allows it to bypass this going through. So anyway, it's all complicated and very simple at the same time. It's kind of funky thing because there's no moving parts, right? It's just it's just this. And we're going to replace these.
Morgan, so I got a question for you. With the nitrogen, why do we have nitrogen on the back shock, and why don't I have nitrogen on the front one?
That's a great question. So the reason you have it on the shock and not the forks is that this one unit, right, is doing all the work that these two front units are doing, right? It's one piece doing the same amount of work as two pieces. So it gets way hotter. Air, which is 70% nitrogen, it expands more than pure nitrogen when it gets hot. So air, when it gets hot, like just normal air that we're breathing, when it gets hot, it expands. I mean, you guys have seen Boyle's Law if you want to look that up. The air particles get further apart and it expands, makes it stiff. So this gets way hotter. If you guys are ever out riding and you're hammered a bunch of whoops or hammered a bunch of hard stuff, stop, take your hand and grab this shock reservoir, and you will know what I'm talking about. They get brutally hot. Like, can't touch it with your hands hot if you're hammering. Your forks don't tend to get that hot. It's because two things are doing the same job. I mean, right? It's two wheels. The front is being controlled by two big, separate deals with lots of oil in them, keeping them cool. The back is this tiny little thing with a tiny amount of oil getting really, really hot. So you do pure nitrogen in that because nitrogen by itself doesn't expand like air does. So because that's what can make it harsh. If you just put air in here and not nitrogen and went and rode, it would the back end would get really harsh. It's also why there's bleeders on your front forks. You can bleed that air off because, again, if you go out and ride really hard and stop, even if you put your bike up on a stand, you would notice that you could let air out of your bleeders. So you always want that neutral to the world. Like for your bike to perform like the manufacturer wants it to, you want the same air pressure inside as outside on your forks. And actually, KTM experimented. They had a nitrogen bladder in forks for 3 or 4 years. The old closed chamber, twin chamber KTM forks on the 12, 13, 14, somewhere in there. They had a little nitrogen bladder, and the forks were amazing. They worked really, really well, but they were kind of a pain in the butt to service, like because people had to have nitrogen just to do fork seals, which people weren't into. So,
okay, so that answers my question about the nitrogen in the rear, but now I got a follow-up question.
Yeah.
So this one's charged to 150 psi. Why don't we charge the air in the front
to the same? Again, it has to do with what this thing is doing, because the back, it's supporting way more weight than the two front forks, right? So theoretically you're balanced middle of the bike and all that stuff, but the reality is there's a lot more weight on the shock than there is on the forks as you hammer things. And so, and this is from what I understand. I guess I haven't really looked into why it's 150 and not on the other one, but what I can figure out is that there's a lot more weight, again, a lot more work for this to do than the forks. So you have to put a positive pressure into it instead of just neutral. If you put neutral, it can't push the oil back through the valving fast enough, like through the high speed. It can't do it fast enough. You can do it, and the bike will ride, it'll go and the whatever, but it won't move it back through quickly enough. So you'll end up with a bike that's really wallowy and terrible if you just because nitrogen leaks sometimes anyway. Like bladders and the other style leak. These pistons sometimes leak. They'll whatever they leak out, and so you get a bike with 50 pounds of psi in it because they haven't ever serviced it and all this stuff, and the bike's real sluggish handling. Doesn't work very well at all. So.
This is why it's important to service your rear suspension.
Yeah.
And this is why, if you need help, you bring it over to Morgan at Highland Cycles, and he will help you out.
Yeah, and then actually, arguably, when I took that nitrogen bolt out, I don't feel like there was enough nitrogen in there. Like, it didn't feel to me like there was 100 psi or 150 psi. It's hard to tell without a gauge, but it didn't blow out as much as I thought it was going to. It's probably because it hasn't been serviced in 100 and whatever hours. So and we'll take this apart here and you'll see, well actually we're not going to take this all the way apart because it's kind of a pain in the butt, but there's a piston in here that separates the nitrogen from the oil, and that piston has O-rings on the side. There's two, I think this year has two. There's O-rings on the side going around that piston, and they're just rubber on aluminum, so they eventually leak. I mean, if you imagine a tire with a tube in it, you fill it with air and you park it for 6 months, you come back, there's not going to be as much air in that tube, even though there's no leak. It's because tiny little particles like air and nitrogen can slip past rubber slowly but surely. It's slow, but it happens. So it's another, like I said, that's another reason you want to service this stuff, and even just change the oil. If you're just going to change the oil, it's a good idea just to do that every now and then. Every 40 to 50 hours is what us suspension tuners tell you. a lot of people that's really hard to do because you pay me, you know, it's like, this is like a $200 job. If you bring it in, just drop it off just to service it. That's a lot of money, especially if you ride a lot. So it's part of why I do these videos is try to get people, you know, doing it themselves if they can, even if you got to buy some tools. And then like all of this without the nitrogen isn't that hard to do. And you can do most of it, and then I get a lot of guys, they do all the work, everything, all the oil, put it back together, and they bring it to me, and I just charge it. And I charge $10. Sometimes I don't charge anything, it depends on the situation, but maximum is $10 to put nitrogen in one of these things. So that's why I want people to learn how to do it, because I get the fact that it's daunting, it's expensive. I want people riding, and I want their gear to work right. And if your stuff's all worn out and it's not working right. The other thing we got to go deal with is I'm 99% sure I got new bushings here, but they need to be replaced. These are definitely worn out. So,
so what do you look for?
Yeah.
How can you tell that they're worn out?
Let's see. Part of that comes from the fact I do this a lot, but also, and when I get the new ones, you'll see this coating here is, it should be more black or dark, like dark gray, and you can see it's kind of worn down to the point where there isn't much dark gray left. So that means, and that's okay, that's the coating that's supposed to wear off, not the aluminum on the shock body. That's supposed to wear, so it's normal, but you want that to, you know, you need that to be nice and smooth. And there's also O-rings behind this. We'll just take this off that help it seal. So we'll replace those, put these new ones on, and then we'll be good to go. So Adam's asking about TBT. Tuning by Travis is what TBT stands for. Travis Flateau is the owner and founder of the company. So he has like 11 or 12 of us around the country now. Someone asked me or us to revalve the suspension because they buy a stock bike and they're like, yeah, it works okay, but I want it to be better. They tell us, well, what level riding, and you know, we do C, A, B, C, double A because that's easy. But for instance, here's information given for Ashton McNeese. Ashton, this is actually Ashton's wife's stuff, but Ashton's who we're dealing with. So it's 2015 Husky TE 300. Name, height, weight with gear, C, off-road, and then Colorado. We're TBT Colorado. This is, and I don't care if you guys want to screenshot it, whatever. Good luck if you don't know how to read this. So on what this, but this is the shim stacks. All right, so this is the fork, shock. Those are all the shims for the compression stack, the mid-valve stack, the rebound stack. This is what we recommend for springs, that amount of preload, that amount of oil, clicker settings, shock. Anyway, with a smaller company, and I'm not bad-mouthing anyone, there's a lot of amazing tuners out there that are just a one-man, two-man, one-woman show doing their thing, right? Like, and they're amazing at it. The thing I like about TBT that is, I think, better is that since there's so many of us around the country, Travis, we take that information and we have a much larger form that we fill out to talk about like whether they sit down more, stand up more, if they have complaints about the suspension, like you know, if they like, well, I've got the YZ250, I love it in the fast stuff, but in the rocks it seems to deflect. Okay, that's all important information that we need to know. But everything is very subjective, right, to the rider. Like different people ride different things. Different people are sensitive to different things. Like all that stuff, we talk to him, feed that to Travis. He sends us the information back. We get this build sheet. We build the bike, we give it back to the customer, and then we follow up. You know, and I'm sure a lot of the other tuners do this too, but as a TBT shop, we follow up with them heavily afterwards and ask them, what do you think, how you like it, whatever, and we find out what they've done to the clickers. That's a huge telltale sign. Is if for instance, when I first had TBT do my valving, a friend of mine, Brady, did it, I got it back. It was instantly better than stock, but I knew I could make it better, so I clicked on it, and I clicked and clicked and clicked until I got it where I was really, really happy. And then I gave that information back to Brady because I told him, well, I ended up, instead of 15 clicks out, I ended up 10 on the compression instead of, you know, whatever. I told him where it was. So then he goes back to Travis with that information saying, okay, so I know the guy's an old A rider, blah, blah, blah. You know, he rides this stuff most of the time, and he ended up with these clicker settings, and he's really happy with it. That will then make Travis adjust the shim stacks for the next person so that we get it closer, like, because you really want, like, in a perfect world, you want to be about in the middle of your clicker settings when you start. So he'll adjust the shim stack to based on what my clicker settings were for a guy like me who matches all my information, right? And he'll have all that, and so we feed that back and forth so that you don't get, for instance, you know, we're a shop here in Western Colorado with a lot of rocks, a lot of dry, deserty stuff, and the big mountains and, you know, roots and logs and things like that. My settings are going to be very different from maybe another 40A guy who finishes in about the same way but races GNCCs back east. Completely different shim stack, because that's a way different form of riding. There's mud, there's, you know, everything's different. So that's, again, what I like about TBT is it's way more specialized for the person. I think you end up with a much better end product, you know, to the user.
So yeah. I have two takeaways from this,
yeah.
And the takeaways, the first takeaway is that if you are going with Morgan and you're going through TBT, they have the database with all the info for the different types of racing that you do, so that they could adjust your suspension for that type of riding. And it's not just the type of riding that you're doing, but it's also your weight and your height that's really important. So all that kind of it's a combination to get you into the ballpark to make you feel more comfortable on your bike. And I think this is what you're getting when so this isn't service, this is like when you're getting
this is a revalve.
So when you're getting a revalve, what you're paying for is all of their data that they collected over years of revalving people's suspensions and servicing them, and it'll get you into the sweet spot a lot faster than if you were to try to do this on your own.
Yeah.
And then the second takeaway that I have is about the shim stack. So you were saying how you were adjusting the clickers after you had your suspension revalved, and so when you're adjusting the clickers, it's as if the shim stack, what I understand is it restricts the flow of oil.
Yep.
And the clickers also do that. So if you are restricting more flow, then you'd want to have a shim stack that's a little bit thicker.
Yeah, stiffer.
Right. So you want to get it to like a neutral area so that when you do need to change it for different types of riding, then you have more adjustability up and down. So
right. Which, and for here, it's specific, like, well, all of Colorado, and I'm sure other places. I just haven't spent much time other than in the West. But in the West, especially, for instance, Montrose, just east of here, we have huge desert with big whoops, high-speed hill climbs, like third, fourth, fifth gear, like that kind of stuff. And then you turn a corner, go up a hill, and all of a sudden it's first and second gear, really tight, rocky stuff. It's hard to set up a suspension perfectly to work both places. So it's nice to have, if you're kind of in the middle with your clickers and everything's working good, then you can go out to the fast stuff and you dial in a little more compression generally, that's what I do, and go hammer, hammer, hammer. But then if I know I want to go ride rocks, I'll back that out, and I don't write them down. A lot of people do. I probably should write things down, but I kind of know on my bikes, it's like if I know I'm going to the desert and I'm going to go fast, I'll go 3 clicks in on the compression front and rear, and that's about all I do. And then if I know I'm going to the mountains and the rocks and whatever, I'll back that back out 3 clicks, and then I'm good. I know that that's for me. Now, that's not for everyone. I don't mess with rebound too much, changing different disciplines. I kind of leave mine alone. Unless I'm doing like the hard enduro kind of like big rock crawly stuff, I'll dial in a little more rebound damping because I don't want it so bouncy.
So the gears are kind of turning in my head now. So when you're saying, like, does it really only take a couple clicks to make that big of a difference?
Once you get it set up right, like once you valve it, it's with stock valving. No, it's way more than that because, and we'll pull that valving apart and let you see it. But stock valving is very one-dimensional, and it takes way more clicks to get something. But once you have the valving set up right and well by a good tuner, whether it be us or someone else, just a couple clicks make a big difference. And that's one thing a lot of people notice when they get their suspension done for the first time, because maybe they've ridden for 15, 20 years, right? And they've never paid someone to do suspension. And they've always like had to turn like 5, 6, 8 clicks to change, like feel any difference. You do their suspension, you get it dialed in, and all of a sudden they notice that 2 clicks, like you can feel it. It's like, oh, that's better. You know, 1 click, I get a little bit leery of people like, oh, it's just 1 more click. Yeah, I don't know, man. Maybe if you're super sensitive, maybe pros, but like most of us, it's a 2-click kind of thing is kind of my minimum change that I do if I'm hunting for a setting. Like, I don't like this thing. It's at least 2 clicks, but I don't change mine more than 3 clicks either end to get it dialed in. So, yeah. Once you get it set up, that's about all you should need to do. We got new piston bands with new O-rings. This is obviously a WP thing because it comes with 2 for the shock. All right, guys, so we got the high-speed stuff out. This goes together like this and then into this thing. So the low speed, that guy right there, is controlling a bypass down, anyway, through here. That is basically this clicker controls more how the oil moves through this stack of shims, whereas this outside piece, this silver piece, controls more how it moves through this shim stack. And there's a it's hard to see, it's almost impossible for me to show you, but there's a shim right here, there's a valve. This is a kind of like a piston, it doesn't move, but that's a valve. And so as this spring preloads it to keep it, because this can move up, there's a valve stack there. That's the high-speed valve stack. I know, it's weird. So it's crazy, as I said. And one thing that's really hard to explain or make understand, or it's even hard for me to completely get my head around, is all of this is working in concert all the time. It's a lot like a carburetor. Carburetors, all, like every circuit on a carburetor is working all the time that the bike is running. Every circuit in this thing is working all the time that the bike is running too.
So for the high speed stack to start moving, the low speed has to go through the low speed first.
So this shim stack is always going to move, and so like even if you took the high speed and welded it shut, it could still move through the oil, right? Because it's just static in the oil, like.
Okay, so the low speed, does that have a stack on it as well, or is that
this
just
is the low speed
like
stack.
In
here, no.
It's just a needle.
It's just a needle, just a bypass.
Just a needle, and there's no shims underneath it or anything.
Nope.
So why does the low speed have just a needle and the high speed has a shim stack that you could adjust and?
Well, so you're not, because you can. This is the low speed shim stack here that you would adjust, and then you have a needle. Then the high speed, it's the same. Has a shim stack, but then you're adjusting the preload of this spring. So this is together like that, right? So take this off. This is the adjuster for the high speed. Okay, It goes in and out, and it's like a preload on your shock, kind of. And it's pushing on this spring, and it pushes down on that spring, and this comes out of the way, just so you can see this shim stack. You're pushing harder on that shim stack, keeping the oil from coming through that high-speed valve. You're stiffening it up by pushing this on there. And what that effectively does is help the bike ride higher up in the stroke. Like, because that's what I was telling Adam off camera here. Like, I will adjust not the ride height, but kind of how well my bike is holding up in the stroke with the high speed, because if you turn that in, it'll hold that bike up a little bit more because it's not allowing it to push into the reservoir as easy. So it's kind of holding the bike up, and then you can tune with the low speed clicker and the shim stack to see like how it's moving, not how quickly it's moving, but like the way it's moving. And this stack is all very one-dimensional, but like it's impossible to show. Like, but you can. This is a stock stack. This has not been valved. And so You can change this by putting, they call it crossover shims. So you can have some big shims and then like a couple little small shims and then big shims, and that creates a bigger gap between there. So it allows the oil to move quickly for a second until those shims hit the next set of shims and stiffen up, right? And that's like, they call them 2-stage, 3-stage shim stacks. So it's like, that is really critical for making a bike work well in the real small chop and then also take a big hit. Is like you create a gap between some of these big shims so that the oil, as it moves just little bits, the oil can move quickly through that because the first set of shims flexes easily. But then when you hit hard, those shims come down, hit the next set of shims, and then they resist that movement. And then, like I said, this is all about the oil coming like fast through here, and this bypass is right there. See that little hole? Like, that's the low speed bypass. So you're letting oil come through, and it comes through and then out these holes and into the thing. So it's still all moving through the into the thing. So yeah, you can see it comes in through there. Yeah, through that hole, pushes on here, right? And then you have the little low speed hole right there, and that bypasses out through that hole and these big holes. And then you have the high speed, which is to the side, and that's what goes through that shim stack, and you know, it allows it to come quickly through. It's just a bigger opening.
And then that shim stack is not adjusted normally?
No, well, we valve this shim stack. We changed that shim stack too.
Oh, so
when we
that's
revalve, yeah,
part of it.
Yeah, we revalve that too. We could change the way the high speed works also. Like I said, it's all at the same time complicated and very simple. It's incredibly complicated because there's all this stuff going on. The simplicity part is that there's nothing moving. It's just like oil moving through holes. It's just you're controlling how that oil moves through holes. And and that's the art to valving, and that's why, you know, we went with TBT as a franchise instead of going to like a race tech class or someone else's class and then coming back and trying to develop our own shim stacks. I don't have the time, like, or the effort. I just, you know, like, and neither does Zach, and Travis has already done all that work for us, and so for me, it's like it just makes total sense to just buy into it because I love his suspension. I love the way it works. I love him. He's a great guy. He's an awesome family, the whole thing, right? I mean, I love all the TBT people, and so it makes sense for me to basically, I'm buying into his knowledge base so I can use it and then deliver it to you guys, you know, whatever. And because to start from scratch would be daunting. I mean, to try to like figure out like, oh, okay, would be, I mean, even if you know everything about the physics and all the science behind how it works, it would be a massive task to try to like build that up from nothing. Like, I can't even imagine. Like, it would be forever.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But I was getting the gears in my head really turning.
All right, so hope you guys liked that first video in the series. Yeah, I think it's pretty informative. It was really cool having someone ask me questions live, you know, instead of you guys asking me questions here, which I very much appreciate. And if you have more, please comment below. But it was great having someone ask us questions and get me to explain things and have me think about things in a different way. So that was super cool. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Make sure you subscribe because number 2 will be coming out here in just a few days. So if you enjoyed that one, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I hope you guys have a great day. Talk to you guys soon.